All right, third graders, your warm up for this lesson today is going to be a 3-2-1. A 3-2-1 is where you are going to be writing 3 sentences, 2 sentences, and then 1 sentence or idea. For this warm up today, you are going to be writing 3 facts about Japan that you learned from Grandfather's Journey or Tea with Milk, 2 questions that you still have about Japan, and 1 new vocabulary word that you have learned from this text. Or both texts. All right, so before we get started with our writing piece today and answering the craft question, how do I plan a compare and contrast essay? First, we need to look at how Grandfather's Journey and Tea with Milk built our knowledge. And I'm going to do that by first showing you my example of the story elements chart for Grandfather's Journey and Tea with Milk. All right, let's zoom in a bit. So this is going to tell me again who is paying attention to these ELA lessons and who is not, because I'm showing you some example responses for each of these elements here for Grandfather's Journey and Tea with Milk. The only one that I left blank is Central Message for Tea with Milk, because I know that some of us are still completing lesson 11 from yesterday. All right, so for this part, I also want to say before I begin, I want you to also look at your own story elements. So I'm going to show you images of what they are now. So here is lesson 2 classwork. The first 3 boxes you needed to fill out. Here is lesson 3 classwork, the last 3 boxes to fill out. And here is lesson 6, the central message of Grandfather's Journey. This is what the graphic organizer should look like. And here is lesson 8 classwork, setting characters, goal, and plot. And finally, lesson 9 classwork. So again, I want to emphasize, please go back to your old work and look at what you wrote down in your story elements charts for Grandfather's Journey and Tea with Milk. And what I suggest you do while I go over my own version is you can take notes, because I am not going to upload this on the Google Classroom. It is just going to be in the video. So that'll tell me if you are really taking these lesson videos seriously, because I do not want you to just copy off my graphic organizer, okay? But I will be going through each one, and you'll notice that the comments that I made on your story elements throughout the classwork and throughout this time during distance learning will reflect what you see here on this graphic organizer. So yeah, let's get started. So in Grandfather's Journey, we see that the setting of where the story took place goes from America to Japan. So I noticed that some of us were a little confused and thought that he also traveled to Europe, but that's not specifically stated in the text. Okay, so what we know is America, Japan, and long ago, because again, setting also refers to time. We know that it took place long ago because the clothes look very old-fashioned and people traveled by steamship, right? Now with Tea with Milk, the setting is in San Francisco. We know specifically that Masako was born in San Francisco, and then we know that she moved to Japan. The setting is also a long time ago because we know the clothes and cars are old-fashioned. Also, we know this took place a long time ago because the culture of Japan is no longer this old-fashioned today. And women today drive cars, have jobs, and it is normal, and we can almost say it is Western, right? Similar to us, if you go to Japan, especially the capital, Tokyo, it'll look very similar to New York City. All right. Now, for the character's goal. So in Grandfather's Journey, Grandfather wanted to find a place where he was happy. That was his goal, right? He traveled around the world because he was happy, and he went to America, and we'll talk more about what he wants or his challenges later. Now, Tea with Milk. First, Masako wanted to live in San Francisco. Then later, she wanted to feel at home in Japan, right? When she realized that she She didn't really have much choice. She needed to stay in Japan, but she wanted to still be able to feel at home. All right. Now for the plot. What takes place, the events that happen in Grandfather's journey. So first, Grandfather leaves Japan to see the world and travels throughout the United States. Next, Grandfather settles in San Francisco and brings his wife there. They raise their daughter in San Francisco. We know this as Masako, right? Then, Grandfather misses Japan and returns to his native country with his wife and daughter. After that, Grandfather grows homesick for California. He tells his grandson many stories about California and plans a trip, but the war starts and Grandfather never returns. Right? Notice how these events are ordered in chronological order or in sequence, as we like to say in the third grade. And you'll notice that I use my linking words here, just like you were supposed to in your story elements, and they are italicized here so you can notice them. Okay. Now, for Tea with Milk, first Masako moves to Japan with her family, even though she wants to go to college in San Francisco. Right. Next, Masako attends high school again to improve her Japanese. So, for those of us that say that she was able to speak Japanese, when Masako first moved to Japan, it doesn't say specifically whether she knew any Japanese or not, but we know that she didn't know enough Japanese to be able to apply to college. So she needed to attend high school again because her Japanese was not great. Okay. And she does not have any friends, right? We know that in the text, it talks about how she wanted to speak to the teacher who spoke English or taught English, but even the teacher who spoke English refused to be friendly with her. All right. Moving on to then, Masako's mother makes Masako learn how to be a Japanese lady and tries to arrange a marriage for Masako. This does not go well because Masako does not want to go into an arranged marriage with this boy who has a wealthy family. After that, Masako leaves home and goes to Osaka by herself. Again, this is a different city. We know that this is a city and not the town, the small town that she grew up in, where it's the countryside. And so this is important to notice because Osaka, like I showed you in a picture in a previous lesson, Osaka looks very different than her hometown in Japan. Okay? Very much more like a city, like where we live today. All right, so she leaves home, goes to Osaka by herself, and she gets a job in a department store. Later, Masako meets Joseph, a young man who speaks English, and they become friends. All right, so I also want to point out that Joseph is an important character in our story, or in Tea with Milk, and a lot of you didn't include him in your plot. Okay, but we need to make sure that the events that we pick in the plot reflect from the beginning to the end of the text, and we're picking out important events, right? We've talked and joked about in class how including the smallest random detail is not going to give our reader what's important or the gist or main idea of this book, okay, what it's mostly about. So again, Joseph should have been included in your plot section in your story elements chart. Now, those of you that didn't include it, you know that I wrote down a little comment on your Google Docs, so please, please, please make sure you read those, okay? All right. Then finally, our last event, Masako and Joseph decide to get married and make a home in Japan. Okay? Now for the challenges. So Grandfather missed the mountains and rivers of both places, right? We talked about this as we looked at the repetitive language that Alan Say uses. In California, Grandfather misses his childhood friends and the mountains and rivers of his home. In Japan, he also misses the mountains and rivers of California, but he's not able to go back due to the war that takes place. All right, in Tea with Milk, Masako misses speaking English. Masako does not want an arranged marriage. And Masako also misses the freedom of San Francisco, a job, an apartment, driving. Masako misses American customs such as drinking tea with milk. So I want you to notice that the last two challenges are challenges in the book overall, right? These first two are more specific, and I noticed that some of you also included some very specific problems she ran into on specific pages. But again, this is a story elements chart of the whole text. So I want you to be thinking about the whole book as one big whole. And what is the challenge that she faces during this time of her life? And as she makes the transition from moving from San Francisco to Japan, she's not just literally missing tea with milk, although she is, but the symbol, like we learned yesterday, right, is that tea with milk represents her American life, and she misses her American life, right? Because she misses the customs, the ability to be free, to have a job, to have an apartment, to drive on her own, right? Whereas in Japan during that time, women who did those things were looked at differently, right? But again, reemphasizing that it is not like that today. Okay. Continuing on with our solution. So in Grandfather's Journey, Grandfather makes journeys to find a place where he will be happy, right? We noticed that he's always traveling and he wants to be happy. He longs to be somewhere else, so he moves. Then he longs to be back home. He moves. All right. Grandfather raises songbirds to cheer him up. Okay, we know that. He raises them to remind him of different places. Grandfather returns to Japan. Grandfather tells his grandson about California. We know that if someone is telling their family member about a place, that they long for it, right? That they miss it, that they love it. For Tea with Milk, Masako finds a friend who speaks English and shares her customs, right? Such as drinking tea with milk. Right? That's what made Joseph stand out to her. And Masako also decides to stay in Japan and keep customs that are important to her. So that's where we've been looking at that text, right? That specific page yesterday of seeing, and I wanted you to notice what specifically is home to Masako and what is home to Joseph. And finally, our central messages from Grandfather's Journey. I have 3 here. And again, I've read the ones that you've sent in. You know your personal feedback, and I just want to say that again, excellent job. And I can really tell who's taking their time to really think about lessons that are learned, lessons that can be learned, more like in our text. And again, I want to emphasize that you see here that there is no Masako here or grandfather or the grandson, because in a central message, it needs to be a lesson that you can take with you wherever you go, any situation. Okay, so it's not the main idea, right? We've been discussing this in September. Main idea is what the text is mostly about, and the central message is the lesson that the author is trying to teach you. For example, in Grandfather's Journey, home is not always just one place, is one lesson you can take away. Another is shared experiences bring people closer together, right? And home is not a single place. Home is where you long to be, right? So we know that this last one especially, home means a lot of different things to a lot of you, right? And that's why in one of the warm-ups or the do nows, I asked you, what does home mean to you, right? And I mean, your responses were amazing. It's a place where you feel safe. It's a place where you feel loved. It's a place where you're fed. It's a place where you spend time with family. It's a place of rest, right? It's a place of joy, all those things, right? Home is just where you long to be. It's not a place. It can be a feeling. We can even argue that home is a feeling, right? And so again, I'm not going to tell you the central message of Tea with Milk because some of you are still doing it and I do not want to give anybody any kind of answers. So I just went through all the important story elements of Grandfather's Journey and Tea with Milk so that I can help you with your essay. All right, now let's move on to our prompt. All right, now what we have been waiting for, our focusing question task 1. Yay! All right, so I'm going to read out loud the prompt for you, just like I would in class, okay? So please follow along as I read out loud. Both Grandfather's Journey and Tea with Milk describe the challenges of moving to a new country. How are Grandfather and Masako's immigration experiences similar? How are they different? Write an essay explaining one important similarity and one important difference between the immigration experiences of the two main characters of these texts. Be sure to support your ideas with details from both texts. Okay? So, how many questions are we answering in this prompt? You can say it out loud. All right. Well, it's two, right? The first question is, how were Grandfather and Masako's immigration experiences similar? And the second is, how are they different? Okay. So can you guess how many paragraphs you should be writing? If you guessed 4, that is correct. Ding, ding, ding. All right. Now, here is your checklist for success. I'd prefer you to focus on the questions, but I am going to read through these as they are also sometimes very important. All right. In your response, be sure to include an introduction paragraph that hooks the reader and introduces the topic to the reader. All right. So we know that we learned what hooks are, yes? Now, use at least 3 compare and contrast linking words and phrases. We also know this. There are some graphics in previous lessons that I've made that will give you a list of those linking words. Use at least 3 vocabulary words. Any words that we have kind of gone over again and again, or words that you see repeated throughout the text, may count as vocabulary words. Write in a style that is appropriate to the purpose and audience. Again, very important that you are writing it to your teachers, okay? Not to your friends. Compare and contrast characters in 2 stories. We've been doing that, so everyone should be able to write a check here. And then the last one says ensure subject-verb agreement. This is grammar, and I know we haven't been really focusing on grammar. However, please, 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 like we tell you in school, reread your work. And also some of you are getting this comment in Google document as well, because I'm reading some of your writing and sometimes it's hard to understand because the grammar is just really off. And so please just go back to the beginning of your writing piece or your sentence and just read it out loud to yourself, right? And just see if it makes sense, okay? All right, so here is the bulk of your work today. It is your classwork and it is your writing planner. Just like how we do in class, before we begin writing our essays, we always need to plan our writing so that we can organize our thoughts and finalize what we are going to write, okay? But before we do that, we're going to have a simple warm-up here. I want you to write down just what comes to mind. It doesn't need to be complete sentences. I just want you to get your brain warmed up. So the first question asks, how are Grandfather's Journey and Tea with Milk similar? And the second question asks, how are Grandfather's Journey and Tea with Milk different? Okay, so I want you to just jot down what you notice is similar between the 2 books and what's different. Then here is your writing planner. So this document is going to be actually due on Monday at midnight. I'm going to give you Monday as well because on Monday you are going to continue writing on this document. So you're going to be getting almost a week to write this writing planner and then moving on to the essay. Okay, but tonight, what I want you to do, tonight as in Tuesday, April 14th, what I want you to do is I want you to just worry about the 2 body paragraphs, okay? Don't worry about the intro, don't worry about the conclusion. I will give you more directions on that next week. But all I want you to turn in right now is body paragraph 1 and 2. So I gave you the sentence starter for your topic statement for both. So for body paragraph 1, I want you to answer the question about what is similar between Grandfather Masako's immigration experiences. And so the sentence starter is, one important similarity between Grandfather and Masako's experiences as immigrants is blank. So all you need to do is type that here, okay? Then here, you need to find evidence from the text in Grandfather's Journey. So you need to be able to go back to Google Classroom and refer back to the book. That is the PDF. Okay. So I need you to find evidence from Grandfather's Journey. Okay. And then I want you to find evidence from Tea with Milk that supports whatever similarity you are pointing out. Okay. Then body paragraph 2. One important difference between grandfather and Masako's experiences as immigrants is blank. So now you need to name what's the difference between their experiences as immigrants. Don't just tell me grandfather is a man and Masako is a woman. It's their experience as immigrants, right? Immigrants, again, being people who move to a different country, right? Permanently, right? And so what was different about grandfather's immigrant experiences versus Masako? And I want you to think about how they felt. Think about their feelings towards moving. Okay, hint, hint. All right. Then you need text evidence from Grandfather's Journey and text evidence from Tea with Milk. Okay. So again, I want you to complete these 2 body paragraphs only and the warm up. Then I want you to turn it in, because then I will see it, I will look at it, I will give you feedback that you can hopefully edit, right? So we can have this draft process. And I know it's going to be challenging, and this is the first time we've done this, and this is actually what middle school students do. They use Google Classroom and they write their essays, and their teachers write feedback on the actual document. So you're actually kind of getting a little head start in middle school into what middle school will look like. But again, the best way for you to learn during this time is for you to really read all of our feedback in your work so that you can change it, fix it, try it again, and then we can help you from then on. And I promise you, when you get it right the first time, or when you come up with different ideas each time you redo your work, you're going to feel a reward inside. Okay, it's going to feel really, really good to know that you are growing in your writing during this time. Okay, so again, emphasizing that you are just completing the 2 body paragraphs and you have a question set to complete for today. And that's it for the week.